The very engine of the global digital middle class is about to simultaneously vaporize 2 million jobs and create 4 million new ones.
Yeah, by 2031, entire industries are going to either completely collapse under their own legacy weight, or they will double in geopolitical power.
Right. I mean, we're looking at a mathematical certainty here where standing still literally means structural economic erasure.
Absolutely. And, when we normally talk about global tech, the conversation almost always defaults to Silicon Valley.
Oh, for sure. We think of server farms in Nevada or these massive software campuses in California.
Right. But the reality is that the operational backbone of the world's digital economy actually sits thousands of miles away.
It really does. We are standing on the edge of a geopolitical earthquake right now. And to understand the sheer scale of what's happening, we're doing a deep dive today into a landmark, incredibly urgent report.
Yes, this is the joint report issued by Niti Aayog, which, for those who don't know, is India's top public policy think tank, reporting directly to the Prime Minister alongside NASSCOM and the global consulting firm BCG.
And the stakes outlined in those pages are just, they are staggering.
They really are, because this is not just some regional labor dispute, right? It's a fundamental rewiring of the global supply chain of human intelligence.
Exactly. So to ground this for you listening right now, let's just look at the sheer density of the numbers involved here. India's tech sector currently employs over 8 million people directly.
Yeah, and then you have to add another 2.5 million in customer service and business process outsourcing.
Right, which means that's over 30% of all white-collar jobs in the entire country. But, it goes so much further beyond the direct workforce.
Because of the multiplier effect.
Exactly. This single sector supports an estimated 20 to 30 million dependents. We are talking about the foundational macroeconomic pillars of a subcontinent.
You're talking about rent payments, grocery supply chains, school fees.
Consumer debt, all of it.
Yeah.
If this workforce is disrupted, it doesn't just hurt a few quarterly earnings reports in New York.
No, it violently snaps global IT supply chains. It aggressively redirects global capital flows, and it just fundamentally redefines the future of artificial intelligence development.
So if you're trying to navigate the future of your own career right now, or maybe you're investing in emerging markets, or just trying to decode these massive macroeconomic shifts of the 2020s, consider this deep dive your critical roadmap.
And the only way to actually navigate that roadmap is to understand the mechanics of the threat itself.
Right. We have to strip away the macro-level anxiety.
Yeah. Ignore the headlines about robots taking over the world. We need to look at the granular, day-to-day reality of the tech floor.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to identify exactly what software is replacing which human being and, why it's happening exactly right now.
Which is the crucial question.
Because the fear of automation is practically woven into human history, right? We had the printing press, the Industrial Revolution.
The massive computerization waves of the 1980s and 90s.
Exactly. And during every single one of those eras, critics insisted that jobs would permanently disappear.
But every time, the global economy just created different, often higher-paying types of jobs.
Right. So I want to push back a bit on the doomsday framing here. Why is this specific wave of AI what the report categorizes as Generation 4? Why is it uniquely destructive compared to all those previous technological paradigm shifts?
It's a really vital distinction to make, and to answer it, we actually have to trace the 100-year trajectory of this technology.
100 years?
Yeah, artificial intelligence isn't a product of the 2020s. It's been pursued for a century, mostly characterized by these massive bursts of funding, followed by long, dormant periods.
Right, what the industry calls AI winters.
Exactly. The conceptual genesis goes all the way back to 1927 with the German film Metropolis. That gave us the very first cultural depiction of an intelligent humanoid robot.
But the actual engineering came much later, obviously.
Right. We categorized Generation 1 as roughly 1966 with ELIZA. That was a rudimentary program that could loosely mimic a psychotherapist using really simple pattern matching.
It was basically a parlor trick. It just reflected your own words back to you based on hard-coded rules.
Exactly. And then we suffered a long winter until Generation 2 arrived around 2011.
That was IBM's Watson winning Jeopardy, right?
Yes. It used highly curated machine learning and natural language processing. And it was incredibly impressive, but it required a room-sized supercomputer.
And millions of dollars of custom engineering just for that single task.
Right. Then Generation 3 arrives in 2016 when DeepMind's AlphaGo uses deep neural networks to defeat the human world champion at Go.
But again, those were entirely isolated, bespoke systems. I mean, Watson was custom built to win a trivia game. AlphaGo was brilliant, but it literally only played a board game.
They were contained.
Right. Neither of those systems could sit on my laptop and balance my spreadsheets or write my marketing copy.
And that containment is the fundamental difference. Generation 4 is uniquely disruptive because it entirely shatters that containment.
How so?
It represents a convergence of 4 distinct forces we have never seen simultaneously. First, we're combining massive, scalable compute power with the entire internet serving as a data backbone.
Okay.
Second, and honestly most crucially, we have the advent of modular transformer architectures.
Let's break that down for our listeners who aren't deep in the machine learning weeds. What exactly is a modular transformer architecture, and why does it change the game so radically?
Well, before transformers, AI processed language sequentially, literally word by word.
Oh, so it struggles with
context massively. By the time it got to the end of a long paragraph, it had essentially forgotten the beginning.
Right.
But a transformer architecture uses a mechanism called self-attention. So imagine reading a complex legal document. Instead of reading word by word, a transformer allows the AI to perceive the entire chapter at once. It instantly understands the relationship between the first word and the 1,000th word simultaneously.
Oh, wow. So it processes context holistically.
Yes, exactly. And then you add the third and fourth forces to that, API accessibility and user experience integration.
Meaning it's no longer locked away in a lab.
Exactly. Generation 4 is consumer ready. It's accessible via a simple API call, and it's embedded directly into the software suites we already use for coding, writing, and teaching.
So it's the workflow integration that makes it so potent. I mean, it's the difference between having to walk to a public library to look up an encyclopedia entry versus having the entire sum of human knowledge beamed directly into your prefrontal cortex while you're in the middle of typing a sentence.
It's a very apt analogy, because the friction of utilizing that intelligence has effectively dropped to zero.
That makes a lot of sense.
And to analyze the true economic impact of this fictionless integration, BCG utilized a specific diagnostic model in this report, the 3W framework.
The 3W framework. Break that down.
It stands for work, worker, and workforce. It's a really vital lens because if you only look at job titles like, say, software engineer, you completely miss the disruption.
Because you're looking too broadly.
Right. You have to break the job down into its component tasks.
Okay, so let's apply that framework, starting with the actual work. How is the daily output of a software firm physically changing right now?
Let's consider the software development lifecycle, or the SDLC. Historically, if a mid-sized IT services firm in Bangalore needed to build a custom internal dashboard for a Western banking client, they would deploy a specialized team.
Right. You'd have your requirements analysts, database architects, front-end developers, quality assurance engineers.
Exactly. And that team would require roughly 6 to 8 weeks to deliver the product. They had to write boilerplate code for the user interface, manually design the APIs, conduct rigorous security testing.
Write hundreds of pages of documentation and manage the server deployment.
Yes. But today, the BCG data shows that Generation 4 AI is driving an aggregated productivity boost of 10 to 20% across the entire SDLC.
10 to 20% is massive when you aggregate it across an 8 million person workforce. But, given the sheer velocity of the hype cycle right now, that almost sounds a little bit conservative.
Well, it sounds conservative because it's a blended average. It includes highly complex legacy system integrations, which are much harder to automate.
Right, plugging into ancient banking mainframes.
Exactly. But the danger lies in the simpler tasks. For straightforward applications like that internal banking dashboard we just mentioned, the productivity jump isn't 10%. It is 50 to 60%.
Wait, really?
Yes. Projects that historically took 2 months are now being deployed in 2 weeks, and they are being executed with half the staff.
Because the foundational elements, all that boilerplate code, are just generated instantly. It's like, to use a construction analogy, you no longer need to hire a master plumber to forge the pipes by hand. You just order prefabricated plumbing that fits perfectly, and the AI installs it.
Yes, exactly. And that leads directly to the human cost. Because when we say productivity boost in a corporate boardroom, what that translates to on the ground is human obsolescence for specific task profiles.
Right.
The NETI report grounds this by profiling typical workers. Take the example of Rekha, a junior quality assurance engineer based in Pune.
Let's talk about Rekha's day-to-day.
Right.
Her job is essentially to make sure the software doesn't break when a user does something unexpected, right?
Correct. Her entire historical job description revolved around foundational QA tasks. She would open her tracking software, read the new features the developers built, and manually design test cases.
Okay.
She would execute those tests, manage these massive spreadsheets of test data, and run what is called regression testing.
And regression testing is basically making sure the new code didn't accidentally destroy the old code.
Right.
Like building a tower of blocks and checking the bottom blocks every time you add a new one to the top to ensure stability.
That is exactly what it is. And when you look at the current API capabilities of Gen 4 models, the reality for Reka is stark. Every single one of those core tasks is entirely executable by AI right now.
In live enterprise environments.
Yes. The AI can read the developer's notes, automatically generate 1,000 edge case test scripts, execute them at machine speed, and instantly report the defects back to the developer.
Wow.
Because Reka is a junior engineer, she hasn't yet developed the deep, intuitive domain knowledge required for complex strategic defect tracking. She's just executing routine logic.
So her specific role is effectively evaporating.
It is. And it's not just software testing. The report also highlights Aman, an L1 help desk agent in Chennai.
L1 meaning the first line of defense for IT support.
Right. When an employee cannot access the corporate network, Aman is the person who answers the phone. His daily work involves password resets, VPN connectivity troubleshooting, basic ticket routing.
The simple hardware diagnostics, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Today, conversational AI agents handle the vast majority of these first-line queries. They intercept the ticket, parse the user's natural language, query the company database, and often resolve the issue entirely independently.
And the tickets that do require human intervention.
They're pre-sorted and categorized, so the requirement for a massive floor of thousands of L1 agents simply vanishes.
Okay, so if I'm an investor or policymaker listening to this, and I am watching AI seamlessly execute the work of an L1 support agent and a junior QA engineer, I mean, this sounds like a slow-motion economic car crash for emerging markets.
It really does on the surface.
If basic coding and IT support, which is literally the bedrock of India's economic miracle over the last 30 years, if that is being mathematically automated, where is the upside? It just sounds like an unmitigated sovereign disaster.
That is the most common surface-level conclusion, definitely. But it ignores a massive, counterintuitive secondary effect.
If it is.
Automation is the headwind, absolutely. But there is a geopolitical tailwind here that is actively shifting global power dynamics.
A tailwind? Wait, how does automating a workforce create a tailwind for that same workforce?
Because the AI is not just automating tasks, it is actively destroying the geographical moats that kept higher-paying jobs in the West.
Interesting.
The twist in this narrative is a technological breakthrough known as accent neutralization.
Oh, this is fascinating. Break down the mechanics of this for me.
Well, consider the history of global business process management, or BPM. For decades, a massive percentage of high-value customer service, specialized sales, and premium support jobs stayed tightly locked in the U.S. and the U.K.
Right, they were kept onshore at a significantly higher labor cost.
Primarily due to linguistic friction. Corporations feared that premium customers would be alienated by thick accents, cultural misunderstandings, or simply the cognitive strain of deciphering an offshore agent's English.
So the friction of the human interaction basically outweighed the massive cost savings of outsourcing the labor.
Precisely. Accent proximity was the ultimate firewall protecting Western customer experience jobs. But today, advanced generative audio model systems like Meta's seamless M4T or OpenAI's Whisper framework have essentially obliterated that firewall.
Obliterated it how? Are we talking about delayed translation?
No, not delayed at all. We are talking about deep learning acoustic models that can sit in the middle of a live VoIP phone call and neutralize or entirely alter the agent's accent in real time with sub-millisecond latency.
Wait, explain the mechanism there. How is it doing that with zero delay?
It's incredible. It's parsing the phonemes, the distinct units of sound from the speaker in India, mapping them instantly against a target acoustic model, and resynthesizing the audio waveform before it ever reaches the listener's ear.
That is unbelievable.
It preserves the natural intonation, the emotion, the pacing of the original speaker, but it just strips away the geographic accent.
That is wild. So a premium banking customer in Ohio thinks they're talking to a local representative in Chicago when they're actually speaking to someone in Chennai.
Yeah.
And the audio is perfectly natively fluid.
Completely fluid. The geographic and linguistic barriers are just dead.
Wow.
Because of this, AI is not merely a mechanism of job destruction for India, it is an active migration engine. The high-value CX jobs that were previously locked onshore in North America and Europe are now flooding into emerging markets.
Because the technology has neutralized the only reason they were kept onshore in the first place. That is a massive shift. And, if you are finding this breakdown of global tech power dynamics valuable, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future deep dives. The structural forces we are analyzing here will dictate global market trends for the next decade.
Absolutely. But we cannot look at that massive offshore migration opportunity in a vacuum.
Right.
It is actively colliding with severe structural deficits within India's domestic ecosystem, and the NITI report is incredibly blunt about this vulnerability.
Let's get into those structural deficits. Because it's one thing to have a technological tailwind pushing jobs towards your borders, but it is another entirely to have a population capable of absorbing and executing that complex work.
Exactly.
What are the specific vulnerabilities the report flags?
The report identifies 4 compounding crises. The first is foundational education. If you look at nations prioritizing technological sovereignty right now, like China and Russia, computer science and algorithmic logic are heavily integrated.
Usually strictly mandatory.
Yes, at primary and secondary educational levels. But India, despite its reputation as an IT powerhouse, actually has no mandatory computer science education across its vast decentralized schooling system.
Really?
The early exposure to computational thinking is just missing at a systemic scale.
Just to clarify for our global audience, the Indian educational system refers to high school milestones as standards. So when we say the 10th standard, we're talking about roughly 15 to 16-year-old students.
Right.
You are saying millions of students are reaching that critical age without ever being forced to understand how a computer actually processes logic.
That is the reality. And that foundational deficit bleeds upward into the second vulnerability, which is the talent pipeline at the absolute highest levels of innovation.
Okay, how bad is it?
Well, India currently produces fewer than 500 AI-related PhDs annually.
That seems incredibly low for a country of over 1 billion people.
It is, and when you examine the global innovation footprint, the statistics are not just poor, they are actively regressing. India's share of globally granted AI patents actually fell from roughly 8 to 10% in 2010 down to under 5% in 2023.
I really want to pause on that. It fell. During the most explosive period of AI development in human history, their global share of intellectual property shrank.
It shrank as a percentage of the global total, yes, because competing nations are accelerating at a violent, unprecedented rate.
Wow.
To contextualize that sub-5% figure, China currently commands roughly 70% of all global granted AI patents.
70%?
Yeah.
But that is not a competitive advantage. That is a total monopoly on the underlying mathematics of the future economy.
It's dominance. And that leads to the third deficit, which is the immediate market reality. Supply versus demand. Currently, the supply of capable AI talent in India only fulfills about 50% of the active corporate demand.
So they only have half the people they need right now.
Yes. And the math guarantees that the gap is going to widen. The market demand for specialized AI professionals is growing at a 25% compound annual growth rate, but the educational supply pipeline is only growing at 15%.
So the deficit literally compounds every single year. You're trying to fill a leaking bucket while someone turns the faucet up.
Exactly. And the fourth vulnerability is the one that drains the bucket entirely, brain drain.
Oh.
The NDTI report highlights a truly devastating statistic here.
Right.
44% of India's top-tier AI researchers currently reside and work outside of the country.
Wait, almost half of the absolute smartest algorithmic minds the country produces immediately leave.
Yes.
Why? Is it purely a salary issue?
Salary plays a role, definitely. But the root cause is structural infrastructure. Training a foundational Generation 4 model requires massive, interconnected clusters of advanced GPUs. We're talking thousands of chips running simultaneously for months. India lacks a centralized, high-performance computing grid that is accessible to academic researchers. They also face sluggish research funding allocation and a real lack of heavily incentivized domestic career paths.
So the ecosystem trains these exceptional minds and then essentially watches them migrate to Silicon Valley, London, or Toronto.
Because those hubs provide the computational sandbox they require to build their life's work.
Okay, let's zoom out and look at the geopolitical chessboard for a second. We established China's 70% patent dominance.
Yeah.
How are other nations weaponizing public policy to win this specific race?
Oh, it's aggressive.
Because listening to this, it becomes clear this isn't just free market corporate competition anymore. This is nation-state warfare for survival in the 21st century.
It is absolute nation-state competition, and the speed of execution is just breathtaking. Look at Saudi Arabia, for example.
Okay.
They have a total population of roughly 35 million people. Yet, through aggressive top-down state policy, they have already trained nearly 800,000 citizens in applied AI.
Wait, 800,000 trained out of a population of 35 million?
Yes. They view artificial intelligence as the new oil, and they are injecting $20 billion directly into AI infrastructure and ecosystem development.
The density of that skilling initiative is staggering. They are essentially militarizing their workforce's technical literacy.
Or look at the United Arab Emirates. They didn't just fund research. They built the world's first dedicated AI university, the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence.
Specifically to attract talent.
Entirely to act as a gravitational magnet for top-tier global talent. And China, beyond the patents, they recognize the foundational education deficit we discussed earlier.
Right, the high school problem.
In 2022, they systematically integrated AI algorithms and programming into their national high school curricula. They are attacking the pipeline crisis before the students even reach university.
Okay, so we've established the macro threat of automation, the fierce headwinds of educational deficits, and this massive state-sponsored global competition.
Yeah.
But when we look at how massive corporations are actually reacting to this on the ground right now, there is a massive paradox that the report highlights.
The IBM situation.
Yes, and this is where the conversation gets really interesting. Because logic dictates that if an AI can flawlessly execute the job of a junior coder like Reka, a corporation would just fire all the juniors, save millions in payroll, and only keep the senior architects to manage the AI.
Right, that's the obvious play.
But based on the data, that isn't what is happening at all. I was looking at the IBM case study referenced in the research. In 2023, IBM made massive global headlines by announcing a hiring freeze on thousands of back office and junior roles that their leadership explicitly stated could be handled by AI.
Everyone remembers that. The market panicked.
Right. Everyone assumed the era of the entry-level tech job was officially dead. But field data from early 2026 shows a stunning reversal. IBM didn't just quietly resume hiring. They reportedly tripled their entry-level hiring pipeline.
They did.
I want to understand the corporate psychology here. If the machine can do the work for pennies, why on earth are they paying 3 times as many fresh, inexperienced graduates?
Because the executive suite ran headfirst into an ecological collapse of their own talent pipeline. A forest analogy is highly appropriate here.
Okay, hear it.
If you invent a mechanized automated chainsaw that perfectly clears out all the underbrush and saplings, your immediate profit margins look incredible.
Sure, your costs drop to zero.
But fast forward 10 years and your massive ancient redwood trees start dying off. Because you killed all the saplings, there is nothing left to replace the canopy. You cannot synthesize a senior visionary systems architect out of thin air. That person only exists because they spent 5 years as a junior talent, making mistakes, learning the brittle architecture of legacy banking systems, and understanding the human politics of deploying software.
So by cutting off the fresh talent at the very bottom, corporations realized they were effectively lobotomizing their mid-level and senior management pipelines for the next decade.
Exactly. It's the ultimate short-term gain versus long-term survival paradox. But beyond just needing future managers, the report also suggests the value of these fresh graduates has fundamentally shifted.
How so?
The field data revealed a massive premium on a new cognitive trait: rapid adaptability. The tech services firms discovered that a 24-year-old fresher, someone unburdened by 2 decades of rigid legacy workflows, could sit down with a rapidly shifting Gen 4 AI tool and master its quirks in a single afternoon.
And the veterans.
Meanwhile, a highly paid 15-year veteran of the company might spend an entire week aggressively resisting the new workflow, trying to force the AI to operate within the outdated paradigms they spent their entire career mastering.
That makes perfect sense. So the entire corporate value metric flipped. It shifted from how much accumulated knowledge do you store in your physical brain to how fast can you learn to manipulate the tool that stores all the knowledge.
Precisely. Accumulated legacy knowledge actually became an active corporate liability if it bred behavioral rigidity.
Fascinating.
And the corporate response to this realization is driving what organizational psychologists call the flattening pyramid.
Break that down.
Historically, IT delivery was structured as a very steep hierarchical pyramid. You had a massive base of junior staff executing repetitive manual labor, managed by a smaller tier of mid-level project managers, guided by a tiny apex of senior architects.
And how is the AI reshaping that geometry?
It's forcing the pyramid into a flattened, diamond-like archetype. That massive bottom layer of manual execution is heavily reduced by the AI tools. The teams themselves are becoming physically smaller and leaner, yet they are producing dramatically faster release cycles.
Right.
The crucial transition here is that the junior roles are shifting from mass manual labor to human-in-the-loop oversight. The junior developer doesn't write the 500 lines of boilerplate code anymore.
They prompt the AI to generate it.
Yes, and their core utility becomes evaluating, refining, and securing that output.
So they graduate from being a typist to being an editor.
A technical editor, exactly. And while this micro-level structural shift protects the ecosystem in the long term, we also must acknowledge the macro-level buffer that is protecting the Indian economy from total systemic collapse right now.
Oh, right, the 88% reality.
Yeah.
The NetAyag report highlights this as a critical, often overlooked safety net.
Yes, because when we read the news, the tech sector feels all-encompassing. It feels like software is the entire economy.
It definitely dominates the cultural mindshare.
But structurally, the IT and BPM sectors represent roughly 12% of India's overall GDP.
Only 12%.
Yes. The other 88% is comprised of massive, physically grounded industries, heavy pharmaceuticals, petrochemical refinement, massive agricultural networks, and the vast informal economy.
Which encompasses roughly 400 million workers, right?
Exactly.
And I assume the 400 million people in the informal economy, the street vendors, the local logistics networks, the physical laborers, they're entirely insulated from a generative AI model.
For the immediate and medium-term future, yes. I mean, you cannot automate a physical petrochemical refinement process with a language model. You cannot replace the hyper-local supply chain of a street market with an API call.
Right.
This 88% of the economy is deeply insulated from the immediate shockwaves of Generation 4 disruption. It acts as a massive sovereign shock absorber.
It provides macroeconomic baseline stability.
Exactly. It prevents a total national economic freefall, and it buys the government and the 12% tech sector the critical years needed to actually execute a transition strategy.
Okay, so let's synthesize where we stand. We have mathematically mapped the threat of automation. We have identified the severe structural educational deficits and the massive state-sponsored competition. We see how corporations are desperately flattening their pyramids to adapt, and we know there is an 88% macroeconomic buffer, giving the country a few years of breathing room.
Right.
Challenge accepted. What is the specific, concrete blueprint to survive this? What are the newly minted jobs that are supposedly going to absorb millions of workers? And what does the ultimate trajectory look like by 2031?
To map that future, the report categorizes the imminent job creation into 3 highly specialized buckets. These are the functional roles that will define the economy of the 2030s.
Okay, what's bucket number 1?
Bucket number 1 is enterprise AI. These are the practical application layer roles. These are the people embedding the technology into existing businesses.
Like prompt engineers.
Exactly. AI prompt engineers professionals whose entire highly paid expertise is coaxing the absolute best, most accurate, hallucination-free output from complex models. We also have AI architects who are tasked with designing the structural bridges that allow these new neural networks to integrate safely into fragile 20-year-old legacy corporate databases.
Because someone has to figure out how to plug a state-of-the-art supercomputer into a banking database built in 2004 without accidentally deleting everyone's mortgage records.
Precisely. And within this enterprise bucket, we're seeing the rapid emergence of fascinating, highly specialized niche roles. For instance, ethical AI specialists.
What do they do?
Their sole mandate is aggressively auditing algorithms for hidden biases, racial or gender discrimination, and ensuring strict compliance with emerging global regulations like the EU AI Act.
Oh, that's going to be a massive industry.
Huge. And perhaps the most compelling new role, sentiment intelligence analyst.
A sentiment intelligence analyst.
Yeah.
That sounds straight out of a cyberpunk novel. What is the actual mechanism of that job? How do you analyze sentiment?
Well, as routine corporate interactions become fully automated by AI, chatbots, and voice agents, authentic human emotion actually becomes an incredibly rare and highly valuable data signal.
Okay.
A sentiment intelligence analyst uses advanced AI diagnostic tools to decode emotional and behavioral signals from massive aggregated data sets of customer interactions.
What kind of signals?
They analyze acoustic microtremors and voice recordings, they measure semantic response delays in text chats, and they map behavioral frustration patterns.
Wow.
Their job is to train the AI on empathetic response models and to program the exact thresholds where the AI realizes a customer is reaching extreme frustration and seamlessly escalates the interaction to a human executive.
So their entire job is to teach the machine how to effectively read the room.
Yeah.
That is incredible. Okay, so that is the practical enterprise layer. What is the second bucket?
Bucket 2 is defined as frontier roles. This is where AI ceases to be just software and becomes a converging accelerator for other deep technologies. AI does not operate in a vacuum. This bucket includes highly theoretical roles transitioning to reality, like neurohaptic engineers, and crucially, quantum machine learning engineers.
Quantum machine learning. So that is the marriage of quantum computing's processing power with artificial intelligence's pattern recognition.
Yes. And the Indian government is taking this convergence incredibly seriously. They recently launched the National Quantum Mission, backing it with a massive budget of 6,000 crore rupees.
Just to translate that for our international listeners, 6,000 crore rupees is roughly 700 to 750 million US dollars dedicated specifically to quantum development.
It's a massive sovereign investment, and the private sector is reacting violently to this specific opportunity. The report notes that one major Indian IT firm witnessed its internal quantum lab division grow its headcount by 7 times in a span of just 8 months.
7 times in 8 months. What are they even building?
These engineers are combining quantum simulation environments with machine learning algorithms to solve hyper-complex logistics matrices and cryptography problems. Problems that traditional binary computers literally do not have the physical time to process before the heat death of the universe.
That is mind-bending. And the third bucket?
Bucket 3 is categorized as AI for AI. These are the deep foundational researchers and algorithmic engineers. They are not just pinging OpenAI's servers via an API, they are actively building local sovereign models from the ground up.
Meaning models built specifically for India.
Exactly. They are constructing generative models specifically trained on India's unique massive data sets, capable of operating natively and fluently across 22 distinct Indian languages, capturing the cultural nuances that Western models completely miss.
Okay, so those are the 3 massive buckets of job creation. But who is actually financing this hiring spree? Are these jobs sitting in scrappy, underfunded local startups, or is global institutional capital moving in to build these teams?
Global capital is moving aggressively, primarily through vehicles known as Global Capability Centers, or GCCs.
Right.
Historically, a GCC in India was just a cost-saving back office. But today, global titans corporations the size of Walmart, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Bosch are completely redefining their footprint.
In what way?
They are no longer treating India as a back-office support hub. They are transitioning these centers into their central global AI innovation engines. The empirical data shows that 70% of all newly established GCCs in India are actively prioritizing advanced AI talent in their top 3 hiring requirements.
They're essentially building their own proprietary Silicon Valleys within the borders of Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune.
They are, but the private sector, no matter how well funded, cannot scale this transition alone. They need a pipeline. And this is where the NTI Aayog report issues its most critical mandate, the India AI Talent Mission.
Okay, this is the master plan.
Yes. It is a massive, government-coordinated master plan built on 3 non-negotiable pillars and 2 vital enablers.
What's Pillar 1?
Pillar 1 is radical education integration. The explicit policy recommendation is to make algorithmic logic and AI education strictly mandatory from the 10th standard onwards. It must be treated with the exact same foundational, non-negotiable importance as mathematics, history, or English.
You are shifting the educational paradigm from teaching students how to use a computer to teaching them how the computer actually processes thought.
Exactly. Pillar 2 is structural. India must become a global talent magnet and actively reverse the 44% brain drain we discussed.
Yeah, do they do that?
This requires aggressive policy shifts.
Yeah.
The government must launch dedicated, expedited AI visas to bring in specialized foreign talent. They must offer massive, sovereign-backed research grants and construct elite centers of excellence specifically designed to lure the diaspora back from the U.S. and European research hubs.
And Pillar 3?
Pillar 3 is the most logistically complex, massive, immediate reskilling. You have 8 million human beings currently in the tech workforce. You cannot ethically or economically allow them to become obsolete.
No, of course not.
The government is mandated to utilize massive, federally funded upskilling frameworks like NAPS, the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, and PMKVY, which is the Prime Minister's primary skill development initiative.
Right.
These frameworks must be aggressively weaponized to launch a national AI literacy program aimed directly at upskilling the existing IT and business process management workforce before the automation wave crests.
But none of those three pillars function if the researchers and students don't have the physical hardware to practice on.
Oh.
You mentioned earlier that top talent flees to Silicon Valley specifically because of a lack of computing power.
Which brings us to the critical enablers of the master plan. First, the creation of an India open source AI commons.
What is that?
This would be a unified national repository of sanitized datasets and foundational models to democratize innovation so startups don't have to start from scratch. Second, and most vitally, the construction of a federated national compute grid.
A compute grid. Conceptually, is that like building a national highway system, but instead of moving cars, it moves processing power?
That is the perfect analogy. You can build the fastest sports cars, the most brilliant AI models in the world, but if you do not pour the asphalt, they have nowhere to drive.
Makes total sense.
A federated compute grid provides tiered, heavily subsidized, affordable access to massive GPU clusters for university students, local startups, and independent researchers. If the state does not provide the computational horsepower necessary to build the future, the talent will simply buy a plane ticket to a country that will.
So let's fast forward the timeline. It is 2031. We have mapped the threat, the required master plan, and the global stakes. Based on the BCG models, what are the two distinct mathematical futures staring the global economy in the face?
The trajectory is aggressively binary. In the worst-case scenario, if bureaucratic action is fragmented, if educational policy lags, if the national compute grid is delayed, and if the reskilling initiatives fail, the headwinds completely crush the sector.
How bad does it get?
The total tech workforce in India plummets from 8 million down to 6 million. The vital customer experience sector drops from 2.5 million to 1.8 million. The core engine of the global digital middle class is economically devastated.
And the alternative? The best-case scenario if the master plan is executed flawlessly.
If the execution is rapid, aggressive, and highly coordinated across the state and private sector, India fully capitalizes on the technological tailwinds like accent neutralization.
Right.
The tech workforce doesn't shrink. It swells from 8 million to a staggering 10 million highly paid professionals. The CX workforce grows to 3.1 million. India successfully completes the macro transition from being the manual back office of the world to becoming the undeniable structural AI backbone of the global economy.
So what does this all mean for the listener? We've spent the last hour dissecting macroeconomic power grids, $700 million quantum budgets, and 2031 sovereign projections. But let's bring this down to the absolute micro level.
The individual level.
Exactly. If I'm a professional sitting at my desk right now, processing this information, how do I ensure my own survival through this transition?
To find the micro-level survival strategy, I think we actually have to look at the historical wisdom of the architects who navigated the last great paradigm shift. Narayana Murthy, the legendary founder of Infosys and one of the core architects of India's original IT boom, noted the predictable historical panic that surrounds transformative technology.
Right.
He pointed out that when British banking was first subjected to massive computerization, the labor unions went on strike. They were absolutely convinced that the machines meant all their jobs were permanently lost.
Sure, that's the natural human reaction.
But in reality, because the computers made banking infinitely cheaper and more accessible, the volume of banking exploded, and the total jobs in that sector eventually multiplied by a factor of 40 to 50.
Because the technology didn't destroy the concept of the work, it just drastically expanded the boundaries of what was possible to build.
And that is the ultimate takeaway from this comprehensive analysis. Generative AI will not unilaterally eliminate engineers, analysts, or white-collar workers. What it will do is ruthlessly and instantly expose the professionals who do not truly understand the foundational mechanics of their craft.
Oh, that's powerful.
The economy of the 2030s does not belong to the person who has memorized the most answers. The internet already solved the problem of memory. The future belongs entirely to the professional who understands the system deeply enough to ask the AI the exact right questions.
Right.
The dividing line of the next decade for every single professional listening to this is remarkably simple. Are you the one orchestrating the AI, or are you the workflow being orchestrated?
That is the question we all have to answer, and we want to hear your perspective on this massive shift. Are you seeing your own industry's corporate pyramid flatten? Are you stepping up to become the orchestrator of these tools in your daily workflow?
It's a conversation every professional needs to be having right now.
Absolutely. So drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't already, hit like and share this deep dive with your team. The conversation doesn't end here, it's just beginning. Because while we've talked about who controls the jobs, there is a massive lingering question we haven't even touched yet.
The sovereign model dilemma.
Exactly. If the future relies on localized, sovereign AI models, if India builds a foundational model trained on its 22 languages and cultural truths, and the U.S. builds a model trained on Silicon Valley's cultural truths, what happens when those two different AIs are tasked with analyzing the exact same global geopolitical event?
That's the real danger.
When the machine handles the baseline work, the truth itself might become fragmented by the data it was trained on. Whose algorithm gets to define reality in 2031? Yet something to think about until next time.